Did you know that Nigeria has spent nearly 70 years trying to develop the North? In fact, the first corporation or development company set up was in 1949, exactly 70 years ago. But we still have a lot of problems, socio-economic infrastructure problems in Nigeria's vast northern part. So yesterday, President Buhari again looking at another development commission to develop this time the country's northeast, which has been subject to massive insurgency. So let's talk a little bit more about the path or the road to developing Nigeria's underdeveloped north and all the efforts that we've made in 7 decades, and we're still at this point. Let's bring in Kyari, who was a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, is live to us from our Abuja studios. He is currently a co-chair of the UN Nigeria Humanitarian Fund. He is sitting on that board with Jim Ovia, the chairman of Zenith Bank Nigeria PLC. Kyari, it's good to have you in our studios. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Boston.
Thank you. You, by virtue of your birth and parentage, you are from Nigeria's northeast. So we're talking to someone who understands exactly why this shoe pinches. But before we talk about the northeast as a particular part of the region, let's talk about the road to Nigeria's underdeveloped north as a whole. Okay, Mr. Kyari, my question is this. We're trying to find the road to socio-economic developed north. How did we get to the point where we are at the moment, in which we spent 7 decades, since 1949, and we're still trying to battle critical socio-economic development of Nigeria's north?
Well, I think I believe it is a combination of things that had happened, historically speaking. NNDC being the very first, what I would call an investment or a development agency that was constituted, and I think I'm hoping that that's what you were referring to. And the mandate of NNDC was basically more of an investment bank or type of intervention that is required. Now, have in mind that NNDC was literally funded by the northern states or the northern region initially, and then the northern states as we had state then. And of course, they have made huge impact. Somewhere around the late 70s and early 80s, it's one of the major conglomerates, so to speak. Now, the question then is what has happened to those industries and corporations that NNDC had invested in northern Nigeria, indeed, even across the entire country. It is the same as similar sister organizations in the southwest as well as in the east. The one in the southwest succeeded by virtue of proximity to Lagos, but the rest had fizzled out in terms of those investments. And I think particularly those might also have something to do with the overall national strategy in terms of national development efforts. As a kid, I do remember 5-year development plans that we used to have. It used to give some of us nerdy kids material to read through and see where we are in terms of projections of 20, 25 years from that moment onwards in terms of the plans for development in the country. Unfortunately, we were saddled with leadership that was fixated on short-term rather than on medium and long-term plans, and then having KPIs for those plans in execution of those plans. So coming home to the north, and particularly in the northeast, it is the right time to have an entity similar to the former NNDC, which is the NEDC. Now, this particular entity, the NEDC, that was inaugurated by Mr. President yesterday, had clear mandate that of rehabilitation, reconstruction, and you know, putting back the untold hardship that people have gone through in the Northeast, particularly the three frontline states that have been consumed by the Boko Haram insurgency, and by the three frontline states, I mean the Bay states, Borno, Adamawa, Yobe. And of course, when you're talking Northeast development, you are also incorporating Taraba, Gombe, Bauchi into that. Now, the devastation had actually decimated the economy. Lives have been lost. Properties have been decimated. Even means of livelihood. Majority of the people in that area are farmers by nature, and farming is including into both farming, agricultural crops, as well as animals. 60% of animals killed and consumed in Nigeria are coming from the Northeast. Therefore, a quick intervention would help. Now, the key thing about the NEDC, one is it is very encouraging for us to have General Paul Tarfa as the chairman. This is somebody that, as kids, we know to be a no-nonsense person. Secondly, the gentleman that is the CEO is a very seasoned technocrat in the name of Mohammed Alkali, who was last executive director in Bank of Industry. Now, I think they have a huge challenge in front of them. Two of the ones that I actually come to mind is, one, in addition to the core mandate, they need to be the entity that would coordinate all the various NGOs, international development agencies, both local and international NGOs that are in the Northeast. I would imagine that there are hundreds of such organizations that are extremely uncoordinated, if you would call it such, and who are entering into that area, and everybody executing their own core mandate depending on what they consider to be important. Now, coordinating of that would basically come to mind a saying in our area where best huntings are done in packs. So by coordinating it and also having partnership with some of the international development agencies, we would see a more impactful intervention, so to speak. Of course, the agencies such as World Bank, Africa Development Bank, UK AID, US AID, and very importantly, United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance, UN OCHA, who have been on the ground in Maiduguri, where they have moved their headquarters from Abuja to Maiduguri to ensure that they come close to the area of influence. And I think clearly with a good setup in terms of governance, the international donors and also local donors would play their part. And it is also giving us in the Northeast the clear goals of how we can restore those. Now, the other thing is, you listed in the initial program, you listed building of houses and so on and so forth. I hope that we are not going, the beauty of the CEO and the board of the NEDC is that they would also have to pay particular attention to the cultural norms of the area, because it would not make any sense for somebody to build something that people might not consider to be worth their while. So by including the local people in the building and development of these things, what will happen is that down the road, they would also have something to do in terms of the technical and vocational skills that would be necessary for them to continue to maintain the infrastructure that they would help or assist in putting together.
Mr. Booker, this is as big as it can get. Because if you look at the insurgency that started in Borno State and all of that, and we see this wave of violence spreading a bit to the north central, then to the northwest, it's looking like, look, we need to do something very holistic here, even though you have the northeast as the epicenter of this insurgency for a decade plus years. So how do you think the rest of the federal and state and local government apparatus in Nigeria should see the new initiative of the Buhari's administration in this regard, and not considering this Northeast Development Commission as something just for the Northeast, and the rest of us sitting there very cozy here in Lagos and think that, well, they can just solve it over off there, give them some money, and we can just say thank you, and you guys go face your business?
Indeed, what you are saying is where the task of the NEDC is, I mean, the best analogy I can share is the desertification. Now, desertification is something that is going to come down from the Sahara Desert all the way down. Now, somebody sitting in Lagos might say, well, it would never come there. But the problem is that any part of Nigeria would be affected because a portion of the country is affected. Now, the thing about the NEDC is that we need to see it make quick wins. The successes that initially that NEDC were to get would basically encourage the rest of us and the rest of the North to take note, to see how best we can put back those developmental programs that have never taken off or have been horribly executed in the past. So it's something that we believe very strongly that with this strong set of people that are in the NEDC, the execution and quick achievements, which need to also be shared. Because one of the things about impact is that the impact need to be, I wouldn't call it celebrated, but actually need to be showcased so that both the people that are involved as well as the people that are the beneficiaries plus the international partners would all feel that progress is being made. And the other strong partnership that NEDC ought to have or should have is with the state governments. Even where you find that it may be too overwhelming for a particular state governor to do some of the things that are on ground that needs to be addressed. With NEDC, along with the international partners, the journey might become easier for those respective states. And by the way, this is not a political thing. This is a humanitarian disaster and a humanitarian crisis that need to be resolved. We may have an example here in the Northeast, and particularly even globally speaking, to see where the devastation had been in the last 10 years and see in the next decade or so the upliftment and the achievements of such an agency. And if that happens, then we now have a good cookie-cutter formula for other parts of the country that may need intervention of this kind.
Yes, you put this out there very well. If you look at the issue here, we're reacting, as it were, to the spate of insurgency, heavy bloodletting, not just on civilians, but also on security agencies whose lives are lost in the north. That is very heavy blow to Nigeria, not just in terms of civilians, but also military and other security agencies, the police and others who've lost their lives and all of that. Then you talk about the socio-economic issues. So if you look at the reconstruction and rebuilding of Nigeria's northeast, if you look at the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the IBRD, which was set up in Europe after the war and all of that, do you think we have a model here in which we see the new Northeast Development Commission beyond just insecurity, but rebuilding the entire space for a better socio-economic growth moving forward?
Indeed, this is more of either we will have to look at the model that exists, or look for our own way of charting a course. And I know that Alhaji Muhammad Al-Kali is somebody that is quite cerebral as well as practical in nature. So we need pragmatic approach to this. Number one, I mean, for success to happen, there has to be security. And it's, again, the question of the chicken or egg story here, because is it the security that need to be tackled, or is it the economic issues that need to be tackled? I believe that it's a combination of both that need to be put in place, because when there is serious and endemic poverty and economic deprivation, it becomes a factor, it becomes a catalyst in recruitment by the insurgency of the youth. Now, the intervention would basically be a block to such sorts of activities, but at the same time, then the developmental aspect now brings in, and it becomes a booster for the economy. And we need to have in mind that there are certain key ingredients: education, healthcare. Those are fundamental, and we need to ensure that those are grounded, even if it means we will have to be innovative in providing those sorts of services, particularly education to the young. Of course, you know, it's a huge challenge for the NEDC, but at the same time, looking at the local, by local I mean the state government, the local government, and indeed even the federal government, to come in from time to time to play their role and play it efficiently, so that the effect can be felt as quickly as possible, so that the economies of the 6 states in that area, particularly the 3 frontline states, would then be put in a sure footing, so to speak.
Okay, so this agency, a final one with you, Kyari Bukar, the president approved 10 billion naira as a takeoff. They were looking at 55 billion operational monies. Do you think this money is enough? And of course, we need to start including this in our national budget one way or the other, so it all goes down on our balance sheet as a fiscal balance sheet, as it were.
Yeah, the takeoff grant, I believe, is something that is similar to a seed capital if we are starting a business, and that's a commendable start. However, looking at this, there are also the international agencies that are developmental agencies that are waiting for this to take off, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done. Of course, by the next budget cycle, the Development Commission would also make its case. In fact, it also needs to quickly do the assessment, and I do believe that there were many assessments that have been done in that region, in that area, where some were done by entities within Borno, some were done by the UN OCHA people. And so there is data available, coordination of that data, and ensuring that the developmental agencies are reached out, both for donations, and also streamlining what people are spending right now in that region, would also make things more efficient. So I do believe that by the next coming budget cycle, NEDC would be part of the equation in trying to uplift the extreme misery index in the Northeast region.
Bukar Kyari, co-chair, UN Nigeria Humanitarian Fund and former chairman of Nigeria Economic Summit Group, we thank you very much for your time today on this very important national topic.